Hey guys. So who here has a phone? Probably all of us, yeah? Well, have you ever gotten one of those emergency alerts where all of a sudden your phone's beeping like crazy and it says, emergency alert, emergency alert. In this moment you will receive instructions for blah, 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 blah. And this is a drill, this is a drill, this is a drill. And I always hate them because if you're wearing earbuds in that moment when it happens, you can't hear anymore. It just hurts. And it's so loud, I never get used to it, and it sucks. But they have this in a lot of places in the world. So this includes a place, Hawaii. So a couple of years ago in Hawaii, they were testing some changes they made to the system, and there was a minor mistake when doing this. So they needed to send out just the standard, oh, this is a drill, this is a drill, this is your emergency alert, normally you're still blah, blah, blah. But instead, one guy made a slight misclick. And instead of receiving that, oh, this is a drill, this is a drill, they received this message. Emergency alert. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. So people are in the streets panicking, running to their nuclear bomb shelters and freaking out. And all of this because one guy made a slight misclick. It's like when you're online and maybe you're calling someone, texting someone, you text the wrong person, accidentally call. Slightly embarrassing. Except this was 1.4 million times more embarrassing because that's the population of Hawaii. So clearly, this guy was getting fired and was not having a very good day. Well, let me tell you a story about a guy in the Bible who had a really bad day. So there's this guy Elijah in the Bible, and he was a prophet. And a prophet is a guy that God chose to speak for him and present his message to the people. And God has chosen many men and women throughout history to speak to the people and deliver his message. And they've done many different things and been from many different backgrounds. But this guy Elijah, one day, he was up on the top of a mountain. And in the land of Israel, where he lived, one day, there was this time when Israel was torn between different gods, and they didn't know who to worship. And God, believing he knew and Elijah, believing he knew which God to worship, was like, I'm done with this. I'm gonna settle this once and for all. So he came up with a competition. He said, okay, well, if you think your God is so good, we're gonna see which God can perform a miracle. So they set out a bull on different parts of the mountain, and they said, okay, without lighting this thing on fire in any way, we're gonna see which bull burst into flames just based off praying. So he let these hundreds upon hundreds of prophets pray for hours and hours and hours. They prayed all their prayers, they did all their rituals, and nothing happened. But then Elijah, he prayed, and in that moment, instantly lightning struck, and the bull burst into flames and was burnt to a crisp. So you think, after seeing this, the people would be pretty convinced which God seems a little bit more legitimate. But it didn't quite work out that way, because in that moment, the people weren't convinced. In fact, it really had the opposite effect. The people were outraged. And this one queen who was supporting of these gods that didn't really deliver was super mad. And then she wanted Elijah killed. So now Elijah is on the run, he's afraid, and he's like, I failed, I completely screwed this up, I didn't succeed, I did what I thought I needed to do, and now I might not be able to try again because I might die. And really, nothing was going right for him. Like, he was discouraged and saddened by all this evil, and after running for hours and hours, he was tired physically and mentally. And we read this in 1 Kings 3-4. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. So my first point today, if you're taking notes, is we will not always succeed. We have goals and projects in our life, and no matter their intentions, they won't always work out well for us. And we may try our absolute best, and everything could be going absolutely perfectly, and then it could all come crashing down. And Elijah wanted to turn Israel to God, and in the moment, he didn't succeed. And neither did that guy who made a little misclick that day. And everything went wrong. And in that moment, Elijah feels like a failure. He's tired, lonely, and depressed. And honestly, who can blame him? We can feel that way as well when things go wrong. We can feel like everything is going terribly and like there's nothing right when everything goes downhill. We feel like there's nothing good in the world to comfort us. We find ourselves in this void, in this desert, with nothing in sight, isolated in a desolate plain. And the Bible was very intentional in saying that in the wilderness, Elijah finally stopped at a single broom tree, which is a sort of desert shrub providing just a little shade in the empty expanse. So when we finally stop at this broom tree, tired, and we feel isolated and hopeless with nowhere to turn, why move forward when we're out of energy and without anywhere to go? Once again, in 1 Kings 19:4, it says, I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. And sometimes when we wallow in our pain to the point where we say, God, I can't do this anymore. I'm not doing anything. I'm helpless. I'm useless. I'm a failure. Lord, there's no hope left for me and no reason to be here. And like Elijah, we say, I've had enough, Lord, take my life. We feel like failures. We feel hopeless. And feeling that way is perfectly okay. But we all have those dark moments. But instead of feeling ashamed of our pain, bring it to God, because we are not failures. We are not hopeless. And we are not useless or isolated if God is there. We are not any of these things if God is there. Because even if we cannot feel him all the time, he's there and he loves us and cares about us more than we can imagine. So when we feel hopeless and alone, God is there because he is always there. But maybe you're sitting here and you're asking, why does it matter if God is there? What will he do? What does this guy, maybe I barely even believe exists, what is he going to do? And we see this when we continue Elijah's story. In 1 Kings 19:5-6, we read, Then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, Get up and eat. He looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. So my second point for today, if you're taking notes, is God comes to his servant's aid in hard times. When we find ourselves in that desert asleep under a solitary broom tree, God provides for our needs. In this moment, God comforted Elijah. He was with him. The Lord's presence came in the form of an angel and calmed Elijah. And God didn't give Elijah some grand speech. He didn't say, Elijah, great job, but next time just do this a little differently. He didn't say, Elijah, that wasn't quite what I was looking for there, but you'll do better next time. He just said, get up and eat. It was a way of telling him, keep going, I am with you. And he provided for his needs, food and water, and he calmed him. God had more planned for Elijah, and his mission wasn't over yet, so he had not failed as God was with him. Now, in the case of Elijah, God's aid was supernatural, but that doesn't mean God only helps us supernaturally. God can help us through various people and events, and even these tiny things we would never think He could help us through. And it can be through close family or friends, or even random people you don't know. And I know in my times of depression, I haven't woken up in the morning and found bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water next to me. It's been the people that God brings into my life and the words that they say. And maybe they don't understand why they're saying them. And maybe it makes no sense and has no significance. But to me, it touches something. And I know that God is with me. And sometimes these things change suddenly and everything is going wrong. And then God brings people to help us. He helps us in our time of need, in whatever way that might be. And it says that here in Isaiah 41:10. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. And God will strengthen you and will help you get through these tough times. And know that there is a hope for the future. Because God also promises us this. In Jeremiah 29:11 it says, For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. God always has a plan for us, a plan for a good future and hope, one where God can use us to do great things, because God is always in control. But then maybe you're here and you're asking, if God is in control, why do I feel this pain? Why do I even have these dark times? If God really cared about me, He wouldn't let this happen. He wouldn't need to come to my aid in the first place if He just didn't let me experience this pain. And what is the point of Him letting this happen? Didn't you say God has a plan and is in control? Well, God does have a plan, and He is in control. And that plan is for good, but it doesn't mean that everything will always be pleasant. In 1 Kings 19:7-8, we see, Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, Get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinal, the mountain of God. So my third point today, if you're taking notes, is God prepares us for the journey ahead. When we experience trials, that's God preparing us and strengthening us for the journey ahead. God says, get up and eat some more. God says, get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. God's plan for us is good, but if we're not strong enough to do what God has planned for us, we can't do it. And maybe you sit here today and the journey ahead is unknown. And maybe you don't even think there is a journey ahead for you. And I've been there. But today I'm here to tell you that God has big plans for every single one of you. And He knows what is best for us. And all you need to do is accept His plan for your life. And no matter how isolated, deserted, hopeless, or depressed you may feel, God has a plan for you. And that will not change. He is in control, and He wants the best for you. Where are you in Elijah's story today? Are you afraid, running for your life? Are you lost, tired, or hopeless in the wilderness? Maybe you've gone up and you're eating and you're continuing on your journey. Or maybe you stand on the mountain in the presence of God. Whatever your situation may be, know that God has a great plan for you, a journey for you. And it will cross mountains and it will cross deserts, but it will always have hope, a future. And with God, you'll never be alone. Are you on this journey with God? Have you accepted Jesus into your life? And even if you have, are you serving Him and following His plan for you? If you said no to either one of those questions, I'm going to give you an opportunity to start.